Hello and welcome to the Final Straight F1 podcast with Ben and Tonda.
And today we're looking at the story of the 2024 Qatar Grand Prix. And Max Verstappen has done it again after confirming his fourth championship last week in Las Vegas. Now he really hammers it home with another victory here in Qatar. And we thought that the McLaren and Ferrari fight for P1 in the constructors might be over, and it looked like it would be for a pretty significant portion of the weekend and the race itself. But in the end, due to some really strange steward decisions and penalties.
Yeah. What the hell?
That was change. Yeah, we what the hell? We can start off with that, I think.
Yeah. As you said, Max Verstappen won the Grand Prix, even after what looked to be maybe a potential shocker for Red Bull, for Max Verstappen. It still was a shocker for the other person in the Red Bull garage. But, it is far from over in terms of the Constructors' Championships, right? Sprint, completely dominant by McLaren. Yeah. We say dominant, but George Russell was hanging in there. He was trying his best, and Lando Norris playing the ultimate team game. And he kept Piastri in the DRS. And shockingly, in the end of the sprint, he gifted him the sprint race win, which was very unexpected from what I thought. It was very close to Russell as well.
Yeah, he was in DRS. It was a DRS trade basically the whole sprint race.
Exactly.
And we saw some pretty cool fights between Hamilton and Leclerc, or one fight. But that was about it from the sprint race, because then the rest was just everybody stuck behind
Not
the
much
McLarens.
overtaking.
But then, despite the team's orders, which were don't risk it, there's the Constructors' Championship on the line, Lando Norris paid back what he got in Brazil from Piastri, where he was given the win to help him potentially win the Drivers' Championship, which looked pretty realistic at that time. But now Lando paying back everything, which I have to say, props to him.
Yeah, I agree.
Because that this has been a thing all season, the saga between the two McLaren drivers, the papaya rules. Oscar sometimes being pretty brave with overtaking Lando, as we saw in Monza, which maybe partially led to Charles winning there. And then, of course, Hungary, with Lando being begged to give the position back after Oscar was undercut by his own team. But now it seems like, after the Driver Championship being tied up now, they are really one team. And Lando is the team player here, and he gives it back. And really nice to see, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I think that was very much deserved.
Yeah.
Although risky, but he returned the favor, because there's nothing to play for in the Drivers' Championship anymore, right? So he might as well, and he said it himself, and I think it's a mature thing to say. He was saying that he's not there to win sprint races, he's there to win races and potentially championships, which, pretty much I think there's going to be a wound for Lando Norris this season in terms of what could have been, but I think he can take away a lot of positives from this year and carry them into next year and potentially challenge for the title, knowing what it takes to really step it up and take it to Max Verstappen, because he has been on top. He has been on form. He has been there even when the car wasn't really there. And let's just speak about the qualifying and the turnaround that Red Bull made, right? Because in the sprint, I think Verstappen finished what? Did he even finish in the points? I think he was 8th or 9th.
He lost position. Yeah, he lost positions at the start.
He started 6th or something like this, right?
Yeah, he started 6th and then he lost 3 positions at the very start. And actually, the turnaround is crazy. And you can see that even purely from the fact that the gap between Verstappen and Perez remained the same between the qualifying and the sprint qualifying. Or the other way around, actually. But sprint qualifying, Perez was out in SQ1, whereas in qualifying, he qualified P9, I think.
Yeah, somewhere
there.
Somewhere there.
So the mechanics, they really found something overnight in that car. Or
yeah, because Verstappen,
yeah,
he put it on pole, but there is a big but, right?
Yeah.
He put it on pole, and Russell was very close. Russell, I mean, he was there all weekend as well, right? So, in terms of the pace, the Mercedes, at least in the hands of George Russell, was performing very well. And then something very interesting came, right? Because I don't know how you felt about it, but the first time I saw the onboard of George Russell being blocked by Max Verstappen, I thought that George Russell was on his fast lap, right? He was doing his qualifying lap. And he just impeded him. So I was like, okay, this is clear. A 3-place grid penalty, Verstappen. But then we kind of realized that it's not his hot lap. It was pretty much his out lap, right? He was just...
Yeah.
And there my initial feeling was, okay, nothing's going to happen because that's just ridiculous if it would, right? And come the race day, we see that Max Verstappen actually received a 1-place grid drop, which we haven't seen for quite a while, I think for many, many years. But what did you think of the penalty? Like, how do you see this?
No, I mean, I feel like this weekend has just really been full of really strange penalties, as I said at the start, and this was just the start of it all.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what kind of precedent this sets in terms of, oh yeah, now you can just go as fast as you want in your out lap, and if there's someone going slower in front of you, well, too bad, they're gonna get a penalty.
Yeah.
But in the context of the overall race weekend, I think it gets kind of lost, because then we saw some even weirder penalties in the race itself, I think. But yeah, even just this one for Max was a really strange one. I don't know what was going on there. The streets are saying that George Russell was pushing behind the scenes to make that happen.
Yeah, there was apparently a lot of drama between Max Verstappen and George Russell, because I think that Verstappen came out after saying that he has never seen anybody screw over another driver as much as George Russell trying to do that to Verstappen, and that they pretty much have beef from now on, I guess, because he was saying that he lost all respect for Russell because he just has never seen anyone pushing so much for a penalty, and really, apparently the penalty just came in because he thinks that his FIA mates made it happen, and a very interesting.
Let's not forget that this isn't the first time that Russell and Verstappen have had a run-in like this.
Baku 23. That was the first
last
time.
year. They had a collision, I think, in the sprint race already. And already then it was getting pretty heated. I think saying you and your FIA mates, or whatever Mike said, those are some pretty strong words there. I mean, of course, can't really know what's going on behind the scenes. I would hope that George Russell isn't, using his position as the president of the driver association, or whatever it's called,
something like that.
To get penalties that would benefit him. I really hope that's not the case. I mean, of course, Max, he's still pretty hot-headed sometimes, and so I So who knows who's spreading what kind of information in the paddock. But either way, I don't think that these two are going to be very friendly.
They're not going to be best friends.
Which is pretty ironic, because even just last week, Russell was saying how he saw Verstappen partying, right?
Yeah.
After winning the championship, drinking at 9 a.m. or whatever it was. So it looked like, but things changed quite fast.
He was saying Verstappen was saying about Russell that pretty much he is being a nice guy in front of all the cameras, being very strategic about it, right? And then when the doors are in your neck in terms of just, trying to do whatever necessary it is to benefit himself, but harsh words, but we will never find out, I guess. But anyways, it is still up to the stewards, right, to decide.
Yeah.
And I personally feel that it's a ridiculous penalty because, as you said, what precedent? I think even Fernando Alonso said it, that in Abu Dhabi, from now on, he's just going to drive quick on his outlap and he's just going to make everyone get a penalty, which completely fair point. Like, if you put it through the perspective of the driver, right? When you're going on your outlap, your race engineer tells you, right, you've got all these information saying, right, so Verstappen behind 8 seconds, he's on his hot lap, whatever, right? And if they say that anyone is on their outlap, like, you're not chasing every millisecond of performance, so you have the time to be careful and not ram into anyone. I mean, their incident has kind of been unfortunate, but I still think that penalty should not have been awarded, because it now just feels like that the whole season, the stewards were kind of sleeping. They just woke up in Mexico saying, oh, okay, well, Verstappen did something. Okay, now we're going to give him some penalty.
Yeah.
Then they just went back to sleep. And then they absolutely just went nuts in the Qatar Grand Prix, because what we have seen in this Grand Prix, I haven't seen in a long time. And the penalty in the end didn't really matter, because Verstappen took the lead right from the get-go, right?
Yeah.
So,
I think that it kind of triggered like a domino effect, because then Verstappen being given this, let's say, ridiculous penalty, he was on the lookout for anyone breaking all sorts of rules and codes. Yeah. So, I mean, some might call it snitching, but when you see somebody, especially after being punished so severely for something like impeding a car that's on its hot lap, he said, Lando Norris, he might be speeding under yellow flag conditions, which is a big no-no.
And let's just get back to the yellow flag and Lando Norris, right? Because Verstappen has some experience on this track, not lifting for a double yellow flag. Happened in 2021 in his qualifying lap. I think it was for Pierre Gasly, or I'm not entirely sure now. A double yellow flag. He improved his lap and he was given a 3-place grid drop because he didn't lift, right? And that was in qualifying. But now it was a different situation, because you had Lando Norris chasing Max Verstappen, not George Russell. He was chasing him. They were pretty much within 2 seconds the whole race. But then what the actual hell happened? Because Alex Albon's Williams, his wing mirror, it just tore off. It just dropped on the ground, and it seemed like the FIA is doing absolutely nothing. For laps, it was like, in my head, it was just a matter of time before somebody ran it over trying to overtake. When finally, in 5 or 6 laps, Valtteri Bottas waved a blue flag, right? And he went to the side and he absolutely smashed the mirror, probably resulting in the punctures of Carlos Sainz and Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah.
And when you think it's, it is bad enough, it wasn't. They called out the safety car right when they were in the pits after doing the whole lap of, just having a puncture, damaging their car. So everybody in front of them got pretty much a free pit stop. What did you make of that situation? Do you think there should have been a do you think there should have been a safety car when the wing mirror of Alex Albon fell on the track?
I mean, at the very least, some yellow flag or something. I'm not sure how much debris there was, if it was just a mirror, but yeah, I mean, it was the main straight, the final straight, if you will.
Yeah.
and it's obvious that somebody is gonna try and overtake or get out of the way or just take a different racing line there. It's not like, oh yeah, nobody's gonna drive here at all. So I don't know if they didn't notice. I don't know if I don't know what happened, if the cameras just weren't pointing in the right direction. But especially after Bottas smashed it to pieces, which, I don't know, it might be Leclerc playing 4D chess. Because it ended up giving him P2 somehow, with the Ferraris being definitely, very fast this weekend. But we'll get back to that. But just waiting until both of the cars come into the pits for the safety car is kind of ridiculous. And then we saw the yellow flag kind of blinking on and off in one part of the race as well. And Sainz's race was pretty much ruined because, I mean, he also, the stop that he did have wasn't very good. I mean, of course, that's not the Stewart's fault, but it was entirely avoidable situation.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, the thing is, it was in the middle of the track, right? So if it's very difficult, but it's a wing mirror. Like, there is glass. It's dangerous, right? And despite there being the yellow flag, potentially double yellow flag in that last final straight, it's still called out at least to be a virtual safety car, because I'm not sure what the rules are when the stewards, or when the race, when the people, not the stewards, but when the people, marshals, that's what I was looking for. When the marshals are allowed on the track, like, I don't know if they're allowed under a yellow flag condition or under a virtual safety car, full safety car, but it just called out for something, because, I mean, it kind of seemed like they were so scared of influencing the race, because, it was clearly a one-stop race, right?
Yeah.
And it was right before the pit stops were due. And everybody was pretty much just waiting for the safety car so that there could be a tire change. It seemed like they were so scared of making that happen that they actually made it so much worse. And not only for Lewis Hamilton and Carlos Sainz, as you mentioned, who lost the positions, but also for Lando Norris, who, well, Max Verstappen did lift, I think, for like a second, so he was safe. But Lando Norris did not lift under the yellow flag. And as you said, Max Verstappen has noticed that, and he asked his engineers whether or not Lando lifted, and the answer was no. So he got reported, and the investigation was going on, and he got a 10-second drive-through stop-and-go penalty, which we haven't seen in quite a while. It's a huge chunk of time. Yeah. It's pretty much you lose 30 seconds, but under a normal race scenario, sure, like, it's bad, but you can kind of recover because there's a big gap between the first 4 teams and the rest, right? But this time it was right after the safety car, so Lando Norris had to serve it, and he went pretty much plumb last, maybe in front of Lewis Hamilton, who also had to drive-through penalty for actually speeding in the pit lane,
which is insane.
Yeah, and he actually had 2 of these punishments. Right? I think he had a 5-second penalty for false start, which
I think that was
fair enough.
Maybe a 10 even. You can't just move while the lights are going on, but for like a stop and go for speeding in the pit lane, does that ever happen? Like, that's not something that you see very often.
Last time I remember this happening was with Sebastian Vettel in Baku 2017. maybe there was one incident that was even maybe more recent, but Sebastian Vettel got a 10-second stop-go penalty when he turned in on Hamilton under the safety car conditions, and he bumped into him. But God, that was... I mean, we know that the stewards are very harsh when it comes to yellow flags.
Yeah.
But, yeah. I'm not entirely sure whether or not it was fair, per se, but it just felt like this race, instead of being super interesting in terms of, I don't know, strategy, overtaking, or, on-track action, it felt very manufactured. It felt very it just felt like punishment after punishment after punishment and weird decisions coming. So we also had the first safety car, right? Because with a crash
there were some collisions. We had a lot of retirements in this race, actually.
Williams being one of them, and their cost for the repair costs for this season has exceeded $10 million, which is insane. But this time, Franco Colapinto was, he was just a passenger, right? Like, he couldn't do anything to possibly avoid that. And Nico Hülkenberg was on a charge in terms of incidents.
Yeah, he was. I think he might have borrowed a certain book from his teammate. The Kevin Magnussen Book of Forbidden Moves, our favorite. But yeah, that was very unfortunate. And then we also saw a collision between, was it Stroll and Lawson?
Yeah. No, it was Bottas and Lawson potentially, but...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't really a collision. It was just your brother deciding to...
Not make the apex and...
to just lose grip in the middle of the corner, which, I guess happens. And Valtteri Bottas being the smart guy to actually just avoid the incident and take the alternate route through the gravel. But I think Stroll had a weird incident as well, like at the start. I'm not entirely sure with whom that incident was, but he again kind of lost the car and just plowed into someone. But typical.
Talking about the Aston Martin team, Alonso also wasn't very happy. Saying 2 years of the same problems on the straight. Which, we can just hope that Adrian Newey brings some new hope for Alonso in the team, because otherwise I think he can get pretty, he can cause some trouble in the team if he wants to. Yeah,
I think Alonso was very much brought back to the days of the GP2 engine that he experienced in a McLaren Honda. Which, fair enough. Lewis Hamilton just overtook him even without the RS. Like, he was standing still pretty much. But, however, we had George Russell, who pitted fairly, let's say he was one of the first to pit, right? He pitted on the hard tires. Had a long pit stop, and unfortunately, he fell behind Fernando Alonso, who he couldn't overtake for absolute ages. It just seemed like, I don't know if it was like 10 laps that he couldn't just overtake him, and he was really complaining about the balance of the car and the hard tires. He couldn't overtake Alonso. Well, and it seemed like his race was lost until the safety car.
Well, this was not the only case in this Grand Prix, because after all those incidents, Carlos Sainz was stuck behind Pierre Gasly.
Oh, yeah.
Who was in P5. Alpine, really? For the last few races, I don't know what they're doing in that factory or in that garage, but they're just bringing something, and it's working, as now they have gotten in front of Haas again.
Wow. That is impressive considering the start of their season.
Carlos Sainz just also, he couldn't overtake, and he did not. He finished behind the Alpine. Which, not the best result for the Scuderia, but they really just, Leclerc, they got blessed. First by the safety car that gave Charles a free pit stop, and then by the fact that Lando had to make that take that stop and go penalty, because otherwise they would have been really, they would have been, they would have lost. They would have lost the chance for a victory. I mean, even now, they have pretty slim chances for in Abu Dhabi, but you never know till it's over. So we'll see how that develops. But talking about Alpine, also some breaking news from the French team, and that is that Esteban Ocon officially raced in Alpine for the last time in Qatar, as he is getting replaced by Jack Doohan for the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, so that he can, attend the pre-season testing or the post-season testing with Haas.
Yeah. What are your feelings about this?
Yeah. I mean,
because I see that there are many different opinions running through the internet and mainly some of the Italian gossip. But yeah, it is very odd to just see a driver being swapped for the last race of the season. Yep, it's very odd.
I understand. I mean, if it's Esteban imposed because he just really wants to get into that Haas as soon as possible so he can see what the car is like, I guess he wants to see what he got himself into. But this is not the first time this season that we saw, a driver being sort of unceremoniously discharged without having a chance to properly say goodbye to the team, which I think it might be a bit sentimental, but he didn't run the whole race length. His race was basically over very soon. Yeah. And he's the driver that was at Alpine the longest. I mean,
4 seasons, I think.
Yeah. He won in Hungary in 2021 with them. He got multiple podiums with them. Scored quite a lot of points. I think around 250 points almost with the team.
Yeah.
And now he's just so long and goodbye.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Yeah.
Daniel Ricciardo was kind of a similar case, getting replacement season by Liam Lawson.
Yeah.
In between the two races, but it just doesn't really sit right.
Yeah. Either. I mean, it seems like Flavio Briatore is channeling his inner RedBull thinking and getting inspiration, but I mean, Esteban Ocon didn't have a particularly amazing season, I think, but even if we factor in the recency bias that we always say you're as good as your last race in F1, Esteban Ocon just 2 races ago was standing in P2 in Brazil, potentially even winning the race, and he was leading for a good amount of the race. So yeah, I mean, I understand it from the perspective if it was Esteban's initiative. Yeah. Because they're maybe thinking, right, well, you want something, we want something in exchange, right? We want to... Hear me out, right? My thinking is, because I think Alpine has been very much spoken about in terms of being interested in Franco Colapinto, right? And there were even many rumors saying that maybe Jack Doohan would be axed before even he gets to the car, and he would be replaced by Franco Colapinto. So maybe the thinking is, let's test Jack Doohan, what he's really capable of. Let's just see a race in Abu Dhabi, because you then have a direct comparison. You cannot say anymore that, he's a rookie, he has never been in the car, it's his first race, he's not going to perform well, because this happened to Franco Colapinto as well. So they do have a reference this year for how Franco has actually managed this with a competent teammate of Alex Albon, right? So maybe if they just see Doohan having an absolute nightmare of a race, there could be some changes incoming, but that's just speculation from my perspective.
At the same time, imagine that you're Jack Doohan and you think that you're safe for 2025 and suddenly they're like, no, actually you have one shot. You messed this up. No, we don't care that you've never been in an F1 car before. You had messed this up. Yeah. Goodbye.
He has never been in an F1 car as well. So, speaking of Franco Colapinto, but right. So,
well, he's had a few races now, but you're right that the first time was already pretty impressive.
Yeah, I think it was.
Now
Monza.
The hype has died down a little bit. Some unlucky collisions, some his fault, some not. But I think he still definitely deserves a seat. Luckily, we will see 22 drivers on the grid in 2026.
Exactly.
Still some time before that happens, but with even two more drivers, I think these rookies that have already proven their worth, at least somewhat in F1, will be the first to get the call. If Cadillac is looking for someone, potentially. I don't know if it's unless it's Daniel Ricciardo and Mick Schumacher, the dream team of fired drivers.
True. That is very true. But yeah, I mean, it definitely opens up the opportunities. Yeah. But just to sum up the Alpine situation, my second view from the perspective of if this was actually an initiative from Alpine kind of forcing him into it, then it would be utterly disrespectful to Esteban because he has done so much for Alpine as well, as you said. One race for them on a podium. He has been, I think, he has been there the longest time, as you said. He has been there since, I think, 2020. He's not had the easiest of teammates. He's had Daniel Ricciardo, he's had Fernando Alonso, now Pierre Gasly. Yeah. So, I don't know the internal situation, but I'm sure this is not what Esteban had in his mind, because nobody would voluntarily just want to get out of his, seat before the end of the season, mainly when it's just the last race, and it just seems odd, and not a huge fan of this. But if this was something that Esteban agreed to, it was actually a legit option, then hey ho, it is what it is. But
yeah. Now, our driver of the weekend from the midfield and lower last week, Yuki Tsunoda, seems to be having a pretty good race at the start. He was up there in the points positions, but unfortunately, VCARB really didn't come out swinging this weekend, and Yuki just started getting overtaken left and right. And one of the drivers that actually ended up in front of Yuki from another not top team, let's say, is Zhou Guanyu, who scored 4 points in the Qatar Grand Prix.
Incredible.
Actually, incredibly impressive in that Sauber, which Bottas has said it's pretty ironic.
Yeah.
They are improving now, but now that both drivers are leaving the team, but very impressive, and also scoring more points in the last 4 races than Sergio Perez by 2 points.
By this time, we're gonna have to make this an official window that's gonna be called Roast Sergio Perez, or the Perez statistics. Could be. Or the final statistics of Sergio Perez. Who knows? But yeah, as you mentioned, a great statistic. I've got some prepared as well. For the special occasion of praising the immense and amazing talent of Sergio Perez. I'm kidding. Not to be harsh on Perez. I'm just kidding. Right. So just imagine that this was the 50th. I think so let me phrase this correctly. In the last 50 qualifyings, Sergio Perez was beaten by Max Verstappen for the 49th time.
Well, I actually feel like this is one of those statistics that you can actually forgive. In this case, It was just, Perez, he was always going to be a number 2 driver, and especially to a guy like Max Verstappen, who's arguably one of the greatest, if not the greatest driver of his generation. I mean, yeah, we would like to see more than one in the last 50 races, but I would say that if you turn it around and it would be more, then we would be surprised if we said Perez outqualified Verstappen like 10 times. We were like, really? That many? Because Max is just so good, especially on that one lap pace. Well, race pace as well. He doesn't have a lot of weaknesses, but I think that this is one of those statistics that's okay. I think it's more the distance.
Sure. Well,
it's more the distance.
I've got one more statistic that maybe could be even worse. Before I wanted to say, let's praise his immense and impressive statistics, not skills. That was a mistake. But this statistic might actually shock you. Since Singapore 2022, Sergio Perez has managed to win 2 races, and Max Verstappen has managed to win 3 championships. How is that one?
Yeah, that's a bit more damning.
Yeah. that's I think that is the moment where I was thinking, okay, wow. And mainly that also puts the spotlight on Max Verstappen, who has been doing a phenomenal job. Like, he left no stone unturned. Like, he has done the best he could at every single outing in a car. And I think it was after Baku 2023 where Verstappen said, right, he is never beating me again. I'm never letting him do that. And it actually didn't happen. Almost it did in Baku, but it didn't happen. Sergio Perez hasn't beaten him, I think, once since then. So,
well, Max's words hold a lot of power.
Yeah, exactly. And it seems like also, Christian Horner is getting maybe frustrated with all of these questions and on the pressure that they're being put under. Because Sergio Perez, I think his contract is fairly solid in terms of whether or not they could actually axe him, because it seems clear at this point that they're not getting rid of him very easily.
Well,
and he was actually, when we were speaking about Christian Horner was saying that he has actually the choice whether or not he wants to continue, right? Because he's old enough to know whether or not it is worth it to pursue anymore. I think something along those lines was said.
But you talk about Horner's reactions, which are usually quite reserved and calculated. Like, yes, it's an internal affair or whatever. But the one thing now during this race weekend, he actually was kind of stumped in an interview, and that was in reaction to the fact that I completely forgot, but to the fact that Sergio Perez got overtaken during a pit lane start by Franco Colapinto.
I forgot about that one.
You can see from Colapinto's onboard that the light turns green and Perez is kind of stands there for for a second or two. But as an F1 driver, you're not at the interstate. You're not at a crosswalk. It's the racing layer.
Yeah, that was something I completely forgot about, because that was one of those weird moments in F1 that maybe Sergio Perez won't be playing in his replays when his career is over. But even Horner was saying something like, well, when the green light goes, you should just go, right? Like, what's up with that? And that was, I think Perez had a very weird comment as well, because when they were asking him about this, right, he was saying that his goal was to get as much clear air as possible, and that was successful. And I was like, wow.
That's one way to put it.
Maybe that's IQ 250. Who knows? 4D chess, playing with Leclerc. But it didn't end up translating into much result, even though he got into Q3. To which, it's not as... it seems more occasional at this point. But it was weird because it was before the safety car or under the safety car. I think under the safety car where he spun. I think that he had some, drivetrain issues because the sound of the engine was kind of weird because it just seemed to just rev really high when he was on throttle a little bit. And unfortunate, a DNF for him, and he couldn't even finish the race. So yeah, it's... For me, I don't know how you feel about this, but for me it is really sad to see Perez performing like he is, because I think he is a driver that has proved many times that he's very good. Yeah. When we remember the glory days, such as Sakir Grand Prix 2020, right? Where he came from the last.
One of the main reasons that he's at Red Bull right now, probably.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he has drove a brilliant race. Like, he has proved that he is a great racing driver. Yep. Even at the start of 2023, when it was pretty clear that Red Bull has a huge advantage and that it's probably going to be the Red Bull guys challenging for the win only for the whole season, I was rooting for Perez to put up a big challenge to Verstappen because it seemed like it could happen because they were, I think, equal on wins and almost on points in Jeddah in 2023, right? And only the difference was the fastest lap, which Verstappen stole at the last minute. But it seemed like there were moments where Perez could take it to Verstappen, because even though we're getting very, very far back, but he had a great race pace because even Verstappen at that race couldn't catch him. He was not even gaining on him, which is a rare sight. And I think people who maybe are not a huge fan of Perez or who don't know much context, they should look at the past races from Sergio Perez, maybe from the Force India days, Racing Point days, maybe not so much from the McLaren days, because there was some difficulties between Jenson Button and Sergio Perez. But yeah, I mean, it's very sad to see, and I'm not entirely sure what's going to happen to Sergio Perez after Abu Dhabi, even though he's absolutely certain that he's going to remain in the seat. But what do you think is going to happen? Or what do you make of the whole situation? Because it seems, at this moment, it seems very sad.
Yeah, well, this has turned into a whole different episode.
Yeah.
Going from bashing Checo to, his highlight reel. But I mean, we talked about this last time a bit, but I'm not sure if Perez is staying in that seat. I think at this point, Red Bull ought to try and put someone else there in that seat. And I think, I mean, even regardless of how Perez is doing, I think it would be just really exciting to see someone next to Max, someone else, because Perez has been there for 4 years, and he's been doing a great job at times too, and questionable job nowadays. But it would just really put into context how well Max is doing, or whether it was Perez that was well, because of course we will never know what would have happened with a different driver in that car during the absolute dominance that was 2023. But who knows? Maybe next year Red Bull, they realize that they're not going to have an advantage with the car, but they do want to fight for the constructors. And given the situation this year, that wouldn't happen with Checo, so they might look elsewhere, and I think it would be interesting.
Yep, I completely agree with you. So, yeah, as you said, this maybe took a different turn, but even though if we're bashing the drivers and making a little bit of fun of them, we still know that those are the best drivers in the world, and they've got a lot of skill. So, yeah, and getting back to maybe change your fucking car moment, right? Maybe it's time for Christian to change his fucking car.
Yeah, and maybe Perez will end up at a different team.
Who knows?
And
Maybe Cadillac could be an option.
Maybe Cadillac, and then we will see the resurgence of Checo of the days of old. Who knows?
World champion 2026 confirmed.
In this sport, really sometimes the wildest thing come true. But now, with this season soon coming to an end, with just one race to go, it's still all on the line in terms of the constructors.
Yeah.
And everything and anything can happen in the last race of the season, as we saw many times. 2008,
Yeah.
2012,
It is. It is very true.
2021
Yeah.
being the... But we've actually seen quite a lot of fights in the standings down to the last race. Last year it was P2 for either Mercedes or Ferrari. Mercedes ended up taking that away. The year before, P2 for either Charles Leclerc or Sergio Perez, which Leclerc managed to win. Well, P2, yeah. But this year we also have a fight, and that is for P1 in the constructors. But we already both said our predictions a few races ago. But maybe before we get to the predictions of the result, we can look at the results of our predictions for the Qatar Grand Prix. And I failed again after some successful ones. We're on a bad streak, at least me. Because I said that Haas will score double points, which, due to some unfortunate incidents, did not happen. What about your prediction? Your jinxing?
Yeah. It seems at this point that the jinx is real, because I predicted that Mercedes is going to make it 2 in a row with the triple header, right? They won in Vegas, a 1-2. That they're going to score again. And, to be honest, it seems pretty promising, because you had George Russell being on the tails of the McLarens in the sprint.
Yeah.
You had George Russell starting from pole position on the Sunday. But fortunes turned very quickly, because, Mercedes wasn't even on the podium, and Lewis Hamilton had one of the worst races he could have wished for, which, it was a jinx. So it did not happen, and there is no streak again going for us.
I mean, we can only hope that Lewis Hamilton has a better race next week, as it is his last race with Mercedes, a team he has won 6 World Driver Championships with. But what would you say your prediction is? Your bold prediction, your last bold prediction of the year 2024 for the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix?
I am putting some seasoning on, and I'm saying that Sergio Perez is going to be on the podium.
I
didn't expect that, did you?
Well, actually, if we play a harp for a flashback and go back to Baku, I said that he would outscore Verstappen in Baku, which would be the only occasion of the year, and he had to take it away for the last possible moment. So, who knows? It might happen. Well, my last prediction of the year is, we're kind of getting us into the standings already, but I think that Charles Leclerc will outscore Lando Norris by 8 points, thus being P2 in the World Drivers Championship.
Is that going to be enough?
I think the gap is 8 points.
Yeah, I think, it is 8 points, so Charles Leclerc needs 9.
But I think that McLaren will still manage to win the constructor.
Well,
which is, I think, opposite of what I said a few races ago. But if we're actually jinxing it, it might be the opposite way. I don't know.
Well, in any case, even if, if Ferrari somehow manages to win the constructors title, things would have to happen.
Yeah, things would have to happen. They have in the past. Well, we'll just have to see for what happens under the floodlight, Abu Dhabi. But before then, still, the driver of the weekend.
It is this difficult. It could be this difficult.
Yeah.
This weekend it could be as difficult as ever. But you know,
I agree.
talking about the single driver, I think it is Max Verstappen for me. Even though he didn't have the most amazing sprint, he managed to turn it around. He put in the fastest lap in qualifying, technically putting it on pole, and then he didn't even have competition. He just never let Lando have a sniff, and he just pretty much drove from start to finish. Who would be your driver of the weekend?
Well, we usually agree, and it's pretty boring. But taking the whole weekend into consideration, and especially the sprint race, I think we can also mention Lando Norris, which would be my pick for, of course, in the race. Verstappen kind of ran away with it after the car improved, but in the sprint, Lando was in total control, and also bonus points for the very nice and kind gesture of paying back the favor of gifting a race win that he gave to Oscar Piastri. So we have the top two in the standing.
Right.
As it probably should be, right?
Yeah, well, technically, you're definitely right. But if somehow Charles Leclerc manages to turn it around next race, then it would be sad for Lando Norris to come third in a battle that was supposed to be between the first two cars. A two-car battle, and coming in third is not something you want. But anyways.
Well, we've had 22nd in a 20-car battle before in this sport. But you're right, a lot of contradictory statements today.
Very true. And who would be your bottom field driver of the weekend?
Well, I think that's clear that we have Zhou Guanyu, who got 4 points. I mean, Sauber, they've been nowhere. They had 0 points. And now they have 4. Thanks to Zhou. So I will say, if you agree.
I agree with your take, but I also need to say that name of Valtteri Bottas, because I think he did outqualify Zhou Guanyu. I think he outraced him up until the point where Liam Lawson kind of just forced him on the track, and
that's a good point.
You know, that was no fault of his own, because Liam lost the car and almost hit Bottas, and Bottas just tried to avoid the collision, and then he was behind Zhou. And yeah, from then onwards, he was very unlucky with the safety car as well. And he was the only one with Lewis Hamilton, I think, who were lapped at that point, right? So
the old teammates
back
together.
Exactly. So I have a feeling that, Valtteri Bottas was in the points until Lando Norris completely put a guillotine on him with this spaceship of a McLaren. But Zhou Guanyu, phenomenal job. But I feel like Valtteri Bottas, underrated race and very unfortunate.
Well, this season, really everything can happen, since we're putting the both Sauber drivers, the Kick Sauber drivers, as our drivers of the weekend. I don't think we would have guessed that at any point during the season, not just the start, any point during the season.
Yeah, that is very
true. I would give this race a 6 out of.
I would say a 5 for me, because I felt like most of the action was just caused by the drama. Let's say maybe the stewards' outbursts, and the penalties, which felt like they were just they gave Verstappen the 1 place penalty, and then they were just like, oh, now we have to do this for everything. Yeah.
to be fair. So
yeah, I hope we're not gonna go by this trend, even in Abu Dhabi, because that would be insane.
Well, stay tuned to see if the World Championship in F1 gets decided by a safety car in the last race of the season. Something that has never happened in the sport before, because that would be outrageous.
Trying to call out my inner PTSD that happened in 2021, which I'm never gonna talk about again, because I'm gonna cry otherwise. I'm kidding. I'm not. But yeah.
And with that, thank you for listening to this episode of the Final Straight F1 podcast, where we talked about the Qatar Grand Prix. And stay tuned for the last episode of the year, where we dissect and delve into Abu Dhabi and go over how it all went down.
Let's tune in for the third and last race of the triple header and the final race of the season on the Final Straight F1 podcast. We're looking forward, and see you after the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix.